These are the early submissions, and I wanted to go over them not only to give feedback to those who submitted them, but also to give feedback to everyone else so you can learn from other people's creative expressions. I don't know if some of you are missing some details of this assignment and some of the things that I explained, or if you're just not reading or listening to everything. I did mention that you only had to do one of these. So for those of you who did two, a great extra practice, but I said that in the interest of making it a little bit easier on you this summer with all the workload, that you only needed to do one. So hats off for those of you who did two. I hope that means that you're just going the extra mile and not that you're not really following along with all the details in the course. Sometimes that gives me some feedback that you're missing stuff. These two examples here are pretty good. They draw your attention because they're very creative and they're got some good contrast going on and there's some action going in here. However, less really is more. And there's a little bit too much in here. If you're trying to emphasize something just for the sake of being graphic or to make a certain point, it ends up becoming a distraction. Sometimes it's too busy. For example here, wrong has got the shadow on here. The punchline here is an it will, and it's nicely contrasting typeface and the way it behaves. But everything else doesn't really say that it's going just along fine, because it intimates everything is going all fine, right? If anything can go wrong, it will. So it kind of intimates that things are going okay until the very end. So wrong's a little bit too much here. It's even more noticeable here on the one at the bottom. Again, won't is kind of like the punchline here. Autofocus, nice typeface for focus because you've got two strokes going on there and it brings it into more crisp. You can see that there are two strokes for each of the letters there, and it's kind of you're missing that because it's kind of blurred. And the shadow here would be okay, but autofocus should all be the same, and it would just be more impactful and have more contrast. It's like you're giving away the punchline before you actually get to the end. Another example here of just way too much, okay? Do not use underlines for emphasis. We have so much going on with typography. Choice of typeface, case, uppercase, lowercase, color, you got type size, you got type style, bold, italic. There's so much you can do to emphasize something. Don't use underline unless it's really significant. And then don't use shadow also. That is a pretty good indication that somebody is just starting out doing typography, and most of you are. So in this case, drop the underline and drop the shadow, which makes it harder to read. Okay, whatever hits the fan will not be evenly distributed. Evenly distributed, not evenly distributed, the type is kind of breaking up here. You can still read it, but it doesn't really quite say distributed. Okay, it looks like it's broken into three pieces instead of each letter being distributed around. Okay, so a little bit of effort there, and it could really bring out the point here. Again, also drop the shadowing. It just makes it blurry and hard to read. If it seems too good to be true, and two is misspelled, it's T-O-O for too good to be true, it probably is. I guess the script, kind of fairy tale, little fancy, it sounds too good to be true, probably is. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Probably is what? Too good or true? I'm not quite sure. If it seems too good to be true, it probably isn't, would be the correct way of saying that. And use a typeface that really says false or not true. But, you know, it's got a good contrast here. The shape, you got to look at the overall shape here. I'm not sure 4 lines of type is needed. If it seems too good, it could be on 1 line. To be true on the 2nd line. For sure, you could say if it seems on 1 line too good, and then to be true on 1 line, it would give you a better shape. It wouldn't be so horizontal. And then it probably is all the same type size and everything's the same. Which one you want to emphasize? If you're going to say isn't, it probably isn't. Make some contrast there, some difference. Right now it's a little too blasé. You're only contrasting in 2 different ways. This does get my attention, but I can't read the dispersion of letters here. We talked about codes and coding as a way of types of signs and carrying meaning. You know, we have symbols and icons and indices of all different kinds of signs, and codes are another way of carrying meaning. But you don't want it to be coded in the sense that you have to decode it to understand what you're trying to say. And that's what this is. This is a puzzle, and it takes too much to get out what it's trying to say. I can see yourself right over here on the right side, and than is pretty easy. But this is really, really hard to read, okay? I guess it's supposed to say never go to bed with anyone crazier than yourself. Or crazier than you, I think would be the correct way to saying that. Crazier than yourself. I'm not sure which one it is. The point is, crazy has to be emphasized, but it's so crazily dealt with here that you can't read it. It defeats the whole purpose. And I probably would, this really isn't a multi-line heading like I ask you to do. Never go to bed. That's a thought. Next line, with anyone. Okay? 2 different thoughts. 3rd one, crazier than yourself. Then deal with the word crazy, a really crazy font, but it needs to be legible. I'm not sure, this seems like a half of a thought here. Really well. If your tack is going, really well, what? I'm not sure. It's something to be, it must be an ambush. But if you look at the letters that go clockwise starting at 12 o'clock, A, M, B, U, S, H, it says it there, and it's an interesting design. But if you're trying to communicate, remember this assignment is about communicating verbally, but you use visuals to add additional meaning to the verbal meaning. And so this is, again, too puzzling. It's too hard to figure out as to what's going on. An interesting design and attracts your attention, but it's more like a poster than a heading. I ask you to do 1 heading, multiple lines, showing some contrast, okay? So this needs to be worked to fit more in line with what I'm asking to do. This again looks a little bit like a poster. This is well done, an excellent design, excellent typography. Look at the contrast here. You've got contrast between color. You've got contrast between type size. You have contrast between type structure. You got serif, sans serif, and a little bit maybe calligraphic here, and script. You got different in type style. Okay, really, really bold, and not so bold. So you got a lot of contrast going on. Creativity with typography. First level of creativity is you want to apply attributes to the type, color, size, orientation. We've got contrast and orientation, vertical orientation, horizontal. And the more contrast you have, the more interesting it is, unless it has too much contrast. This doesn't have too much contrast. You want to have contrast 2, 3, you want to have at least 3 different ways. Okay? Color, size, structure, orientation. There's lots of contrast here. And it's all structured together, so it has a nice shape and a nice design to it. So visually it attracts your attention. Now, it's a little bit too much emphasis maybe with the art that's added to it, but it does pull it all together as one piece. And you could call this a multi-lined heading. But like I said, it looks a little bit more like a poster of some sort. As far as marrying the visual information with the verbal information, I'm trying to think, okay, whatever you put into a hole has to come out of the hole. Now, I'm a little confused, okay? What comes out of a hole might go back in the hole, but what goes in must come out. So I'm not sure that visual and that pun here or what, but the design, the typography, the creativity here is right on, which is what I was asking you to do and to work on this. Now, personally, I would make a few other adjustments here. There seems to be a little bit, for who did this and wants to take it to the next level, there seems to be a little bit, I know the bottom of the N is being lined up with this, and the top of the N is being lined up with that one here. But you got a little space here, and you got a little space right here that you could pull in together. See this lowercase letter G, this is the descender. It's going below this baseline here. And it's okay if it would slightly overlap this N and brought this a little bit closer together, because see the spacing here, and the spacing here, and the spacing here, and here, and here. This has a lot of spacing, and that has a lot of spacing. If you want to pull it together a little bit more, and that's what the designer's trying to do, I would move this to the left a little bit. And you could even move it down a little bit so it doesn't necessarily fill in all this space, but breaks with this one line here. It just fits in a little bit better. Could be just a preferential thing, but it's a little detail that could make it go a little bit further here. Now this is great because of contrast. Contrast in color. Contrast in value. Okay, you got red, black, white, and just reversing things out. And it's kind of like a visual pun here. The top one by itself would be an interesting little puzzle. If you just had the word catastrophe, 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 that filled up this, the word catastrophes, okay? You could say, what does that mean? It's kind of like a visual puzzle. If all you did is just take this top part right here, you got a bunch of little catastrophes inside of big catastrophes. Ah, yeah, big catastrophes are made up of smaller ones. You've probably seen some of those kind of visual puzzles. I'm not sure you need to repeat it again. Again, this becomes more poster-esque than just a heading. Do we need at the bottom? We don't need at the bottom, okay? In fact, what would make it a little bit more interesting is if you had different size of words, catastrophes, with different contrast, different angles, different colors, different typefaces, because they're all different kinds of smaller catastrophes, okay? And what you could, or you could just have the word, you could have smaller catastrophes, inside the big catastrophe. You could have up here big, and then you got catastrophes, are made up of, and you could make it really small here, smaller ones. And the word smaller could be red, and then maybe smaller up here in one of these could be red, and it ties it together. And it takes it a little bit to the next level of being clever and not providing too much information, enough still to get it. And it makes it truly more like the headings, which is what I was trying to do instead of into a poster. Okay, here's one. I asked what this means, and that's a bird's eye view of a toilet there at the bottom, and so you probably don't want to know all the other details. I didn't get the message in that. Eating a hamburger is, I guess that's a solution. You're hungry and you eat something, but I guess a new problem comes if it's food poisoning or something like that. I can see you saying that one. So it's got a lot of energy here, and that's good. It's got good contrast, like how the little hamburger and the eat is made into a face, they're eating it and all that. I just think maybe we could take it a little more sophisticated level besides a toilet there. Okay, this has got good contrast. There is 3 different typefaces here, but I'm not sure we need 3 different typefaces. As a rule, you want to have 2 different typefaces. Now you can have a lot of variety in each typeface. You can have it bold and italic and regular and condensed and expanded, and all of those form a family of type. We'll discuss that concept. And so you can get a lot of contrast in that, but they all look related because they're the same typeface design. Here we have 3 different typefaces, and it's starting to get a little confusing. Unless there is really some context in the design of the typeface, like things get is a wood cut, like somebody's cutting it in, you see the grain of the wood, and it's a little distressed. The word worse is definitely a distressed typeface, and under is really a distressed one, but it looks more like it's fuzzy or furry than that. And I don't know why under is emphasized so much. Remember, a type is speech made visible. How would you read this? Things get worse under pressure. Does that sound like you're going to say, or do you want to say things get worse under pressure, or things get worse under pressure? I mean, how are you saying that? And that's how you should be kind of emphasizing this as well. Under is disproportionately different than the rest. Again, there was an example that I gave that others have done, and you could have done some research and found something that's not already in one of the examples that I gave you, okay? But this doesn't come anywhere near the execution that the example that I gave. I guess there's 2 little dots here. I don't know, are those, I'm not sure what those are. Those are for, they're a little distracting. If that's supposed to be an eyeball or something and a face in there, but I don't know why, Anytime your reader looks at something, they're like, what is that? I don't quite get it, and you're confusing them, you really haven't done your job as a designer, okay? Leak-proof seals will. Okay, it's got the type almost look like it is a seal, and it's leaking all over the place. And that looks pretty good. This is an advanced typography thing. We don't use 2 hyphens in a row. We use a thing called an N dash or an M dash, which is a much longer hyphen, okay? But not this. This is so typewriter, and we just kind of want to avoid that. Okay, stuff happens. I'm wondering why the UF is black and the ST and F is red. Okay, makes an interesting design here, makes a nice contrast, but again, I'm trying to get some meaning in that. I can see happens. Is that happens? HAPPEN, yeah, it's a little bit too much, maybe, okay? A little too distorted and all that. Both of these, I think, were examples that I gave, so maybe it was misunderstood that you had to use one of the examples I gave you and do a different one, but okay, so anyway, those are the ones that have been submitted so far. You can do some improving on that, maybe pick up some points on it. Now, my last point here is this example here does not fit the criteria. I said specifically in the instructions, multiple line headings. These are all single line headings, okay? I want you to experiment with one line of type with the next and the distance between them. Right here. You could lead that and make the line spacing a little bit closer to the other, but that's what I do. I want you to play with the spacing between it. That's why it's be multiple line heading. So those who didn't do the multiple line, go back and fix that, okay?